Welcome to Untold, the business podcast bringing you the best kept secrets of Utah. Big business stories like Amazon, Apple, and Tesla are everywhere, but not very many people can actually relate to those. And small business is where the real economic action is anyway. In Utah, about half of the total employment is in small businesses. And in Utah, small business has grown faster in Utah over the last 25 years than any other US state. Untold is bringing you up close and personal stories of amazing Utah small businesses. With me today, I'm super happy to welcome Tyler Margetts, CEO and owner of LR Dynamics. How you doing today, Tyler?
Great. Thanks for having me. Glad to be
Yeah,
here.
awesome. I'm excited. So tell us about LR Dynamics. Tell me the untold story about how you got into this business.
Yeah. So if you would have asked me 10 years ago if I would be doing what I'm doing today, I would probably laugh at you because I grew up in this business. My grandfather started what was called Linrus aluminum products back in 1949 and ran it for many decades. My dad got involved, worked at the company as his pretty much his only job, his only professional job. Um, and I grew up watching my grandpa and my dad run this business and visiting the business on a regular basis and trying to figure out ways to get candy out of the candy machine and drinking all the hot chocolate. Like that was my experience growing up. And what's interesting is I wasn't interested in it as a career. I didn't really want to do it. I wanted to do my own thing, and so I went kind of the opposite direction from manufacturing. I went into software
Hmm.
and kind of thought that was my going to be my career path where I'd spend my professional life. And uh, back in about 2017, I knew my dad was getting ready to retire, was thinking about next steps, what was going to happen with the business, and
Mhm.
I just started to get these nudges like, hey, you should think about this, like you should maybe talk to dad about getting into the business. So I started doing that. I think I surprised him one day by calling him up and saying, hey, I want to go to lunch and talk about LR, and we call LR Linrus. And he was like, sure, yeah. He never pressured me to
Hmm.
pursue it or to look into it. I think in some ways he thought it'd be easier not to involve any family members and just to, sell it and move on.
Mhm.
And so when I approached him and said, "Hey, I'm interested in the business, maybe buying the business from you," I think he was like, "Are you sure about that? Like, are you sure you're interested in that?" And I said, "Yeah, I think it's worth exploring." So that kind of began our journey. Um, so we started looking at it, and then eventually, decided it was going to make sense. Found a way to, um, you know, for me to acquire the company from my dad, from my family. Um, Without causing problems with my siblings or anything like that, the family business element.
Yeah.
So we did it very arm's length, and in October of 2018 I actually ended up buying the business and beginning the journey of uh, owning a manufacturing business after thinking that I would never be interested in or wanting to do something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what did LR look like at that time?
Yeah, so yeah, at the time, that's when we changed the name to LR Dynamics. That was kind of part of the shift to me as the new owner.
Right.
And when I bought the business, it was a single business. It had been around for since 1949. That's pretty rare to see a business of that size being around for that long. And so the primary product in or set of products in that business were the gymnasium products. So back in the 1950s, my grandpa started to he was an inventor and a tinkerer, so he was always coming up with new ideas, and he was very mechanical in nature. So he
Hmm.
was sort of a self-trained engineer of sorts. And back in the 1950s, he actually developed a version of the folding backstop, basketball backstop that you'd see in a high school gym, which we now see everywhere in most high school gyms.
Yeah.
And so he developed that concept, a version of that concept. And over time, as they worked on those ideas, they kind of shifted their focus to the motor systems, the mechanical systems that raise and lower those basketball hoops. So the electric motor, the winch system that would raise and lower those hoops. And then in the 1980s, he actually invented another product after seeing their basketball hoops and winches being installed in school gyms,
Hmm.
usually over bleachers. That's why they needed to fold up to get out of the way of bleachers. Um, he developed a safety device called the auto lock, which would actually think of it as a seatbelt mechanism that would catch a basketball hoop if it fell, if there was a problem with the cable snapped. So instead of having this big pendulum, this huge heavy piece of metal swinging down onto the bleachers,
Oh,
um, the auto lock was designed to catch that and improve gymnasium safety. So all that history leading up to when I bought the company in not 1949, in 2018, that was what the company was doing. They're producing uh, very steadily those products for the gymnasium industry. It had expanded to things like volleyball nets, curtains, wrestling mats, anything in a
oh
gym
yeah.
that gets raised up. That's what they would. That's what the company was building.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Um,
Yeah. I'm thinking about all the gyms I've been in, and you don't even think about those, I don't know, 400 or 500 pound glass and metal things hanging over your head,
right.
right? What would
Yeah.
that look like if that cuts loose? Like, it'd be
Yeah.
a very bad day.
Yeah. They're almost 1,000 pounds actually.
Oh,
So
even better.
I mean, yeah, yeah, lots of trouble. So yeah, we joke that our product is one that people probably have used, but have no idea that they've used it. So you think about all the basketball games and basketball practices that are happening. Even I was joking with someone the other day. They were laughing because they're like, yeah, I've turned that key to raise and lower the basketball hoop. I'm like, yeah, we make those keys. Like we make those key switches that go on the wall too.
Uh,
So a lot of people have used our product, especially if you've played high school basketball.
yeah.
So at the time when I bought the business, it was a great functioning, thriving business. It, pretty steady, good market share in its market, and but really, I mean, really just steady, like mature product, mature market,
Yeah.
not a lot of growth, not a lot of diversity. There was some diversity in the market itself. There's a lot of schools across the country and worldwide that buy our products, and so that was good. But immediately after I bought the business, I started to think, okay, how can we? I mean, there's a different scenario. Like I owe my dad a lot of money. My
Uh,
parents, my parents' retirement is kind of hinging on my ability to keep this running, to keep it succeeding. And you look at the statistics of like a third generation owner of a business, and they're not very good. It's pretty grim. Most third generation owners will not kind of tank the business. They doesn't look very good historically, and so I didn't want to be that one of those statistics of
mhm.
kind of driving the business to the ground. So I felt this pretty intense pressure to keep the business viable and to help it succeed. And so I'd been to business school and had studied business academically, and everyone always talks about diversity, and so having diversity of revenue and diversifying your risk. And so once I bought the business, I started to look at, okay, how can we diversify this business?
Mhm.
Um, and that was the birth of this mergers and acquisitions strategy that we've undertaken and done since.
Okay. Oh, tell me about that diversification and expansion.
Yeah, so I knew that I didn't have the kind of the chops to do that in depth. Um, I started by exploring, just online, like what businesses were for sale, and maybe if they were related to something that we did or to a capability that we had. I thought maybe we could look at that.
Yeah.
But quickly I realized that in order to do this at scale and to do it the right way, I needed somebody to help me to make that happen, someone with experience. And so I, through my network, met Scott Jorgensen, who is now my CFO.
Hmm.
I hired him from the private equity industry to help me with this mergers and acquisition strategy.
Okay.
And really it was an acquisition strategy. We didn't really do any mergers. It's just M&A is kind of the phrase you say, right?
Right.
So we were so our strategy became one, how do we optimize what we already have? So the gym products, it was a great business, been operating for many decades in the same industry, really great customer relationships, it was a great business, but it had some opportunities for improvement. So I wanted to improve the business as it existed when I bought it. And then the second goal was to find companies maybe in adjacent or related industries
Hmm.
that could help us to diversify our revenue without, we weren't looking at restaurants. Like we weren't looking at something that was completely different. We wanted something that where we could leverage the processes that we were putting in place to improve the business, the infrastructure. We wanted to leverage that to more efficiently run other businesses too. And so we began our search, and we did our own marketing. We sent emails, we networked, we talked to everybody we knew, let them know what we were doing, and then we met a lot of businesses and we made a lot of offers that weren't accepted and that kind of fell through. There's a lot that happens in a acquisition
Right.
transaction, and so
Hmm.
you know you kind of have to try it a bunch of times before you find one that works. So we did our first acquisition in 2021. COVID was kind of put a hush on the acquisition realm, like the acquisition industry, for at least where we were looking. Everyone kind of hunkered down and didn't do anything for those couple years. But in 2021, we bought our first business, which was a metal fabrication shop located in Ogden.
Hmm.
We picked up 25 employees, a bunch of equipment. It was very, very similar business to what we were used to operating. Just some of the things they did were different from what we were doing at LR.
Okay.
So that was our first one. And as we were kind of running our improvement journey at LR Dynamics and the gym products, we were now kind of restarting that same process with another business. Um,
Yeah.
so we had a bunch of learnings and tools that we had developed that we immediately started to apply at this other business, which was really fun.
I'd like to ask you a question first about that first acquisition. So
Hmm.
you had mentioned before that, hey, now you basically you have your parents' retirement plan, right?
Yeah.
That's the business, that's a success. Now you got to go and make another outlay, right? And jump into the unknown, right? Of can I do this? What did
Mhm.
that feel like? Like what? Because it sounds scary to me.
Yeah, it was. It was scary. Um, one of kind of the driving principles as as I brought on, Scott to help me with acquisitions, one of the main things that I told him was we cannot put everything at risk.
Okay.
And so because for good reason, right? Like I didn't want my grandpa to like come haunt me from the grave. or and I also didn't want I wanted to be able to go to Sunday dinner or Thanksgiving dinner and not be ashamed to be in front of my parents because they've lost everything, right? So um not putting everything at risk was a huge kind of the driving factor behind our search strategy and the type of businesses we looked at and the size.
Size,
So
yeah.
that first acquisition, we really did our due diligence as to like what it would cost, what it would cost us up front from a cash perspective,
Mm-hmm.
what it would look like, modeling out modeling out what that business could do in the coming years so that we felt comfortable from a financial perspective that we weren't getting ourselves into big trouble. Now
Right.
that didn't get rid of any risk, right? Like there was still risk. It wasn't a guaranteed success business, and we did deal with a lot of trouble. We
And you're in the middle of COVID, right?
yeah,
There's
like right
plenty
kind
of.
of yeah on the kind of the tail end of COVID, and we dealt with a lot of labor issues in that
Mm,
business,
mm,
meaning just finding people and retaining employees. And so that, there were times where I would kind of get a little worried. I'm not a worrier by nature, which is helpful. I tend to be pretty optimistic. Um, but I'll tell you, there was a time where, so it wasn't easy. And I'll tell you, when I bought the family business originally, and when we started doing these acquisitions, I still wasn't convinced it was what I wanted to do.
mm.
I mean, it wasn't, there were many times where I thought, man, what was I thinking? I should go back to the software industry. All my friends that are still there, experiencing explosive growth. They will work in these great, nice offices. It's pretty
Uh-huh.
fun. And I enjoyed it and I was good at it. So I found myself sometimes being a little bit lonely. Like I've gotten myself into this. It's not something that can be easily peeled back. And then feeling all this intense pressure I mean, not direct pressure from my parents never made me feel the pressure.
Yeah.
I was putting that pressure on
Internal.
myself,
Mm.
internal. Yeah. And so there was a time where I ultimately had to kind of work myself all the way to what I felt was the worst case scenario mentally and emotionally, kind of walk myself to what that would look like.
Right.
So, the business fails, all of these things happen. I lose everything because, I've invested everything into this. My parents lose everything. So I had to like kind of role play my way to that end and ask myself, okay, what would happen if that happened?
Right.
And, this was like a deeply emotional, spiritual, personal thing for me. And I realized that even if I got to, complete and utter failure in the business, I still had my family, I still had my relationships. And um, I knew that even if it got to the worst thing ever, my parents would not say, hey, you failed. We would pick ourselves up and we would move on, would find something else.
Yeah.
And so once I got to that point personally, um, it completely changed the way I approach the business.
Oh.
I I started to it kind of took away some of the fear of the fear-based thinking of, well, you can't do that because if you do that, what could happen?
Oh.
And it's not to say I didn't like abandon all risk aversion, or I just kind of, it's not that I abandoned any caution, but it gave me kind of this mindset of, okay, you have some skills you can apply here and you can do something great.
Mm.
So
More confidence
yeah,
to kind of do what's needed. Okay.
right.
Huh. And how do you think did anybody notice that turn?
I don't know. Although I will tell you, I know one person did. Well, at least two people, my wife and my dad, because there was a time where like he was with, he was talking to me through some of these hard times.
Yeah.
And part of that turning point was a conversation I had with my dad where he looked me in the eyes and he said, "Look, if you did not come and do this, I don't think we would have survived the last couple years." And multiple times I thought, man, he could have been so much better off if he would have sold it. or stuck with it, and I just kept doing what I was doing. But
Mm.
having that perspective from my dad really changed things for me. So I know for sure my dad and my wife and probably my mom, they were with me through that transition. But I think my coworkers, my employees, I think as I started to look more to the future, um, that's when we really started to push some big changes.
Okay.
Which I say, like, that's when it started to become a lot more fun for me, because I started to put my own signature on the business. It
Mm.
became it became my business, not the business I inherited or got from somebody else.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. That's incredible. So you've taken your first plunge now. You've got you bought your first business, and your hypothesis, right, is that you can leverage key processes and scale to make that successful. So what happened next?
Yeah, so it's a daily focus on continuous improvement and how we can better provide value to our customers. So
Mm.
that's a continuous journey that we're constantly focused on at all of the businesses that we have. But as we kept searching, like as we were building now two businesses, we started to look at, okay, what's next? We had set some goals of doing at least one acquisition per year.
Yeah.
Um, and so, that finding effort, those email campaigns, meeting people, letting people know what we were doing, that was also continuously happening in the background as we were focused on the business. Now, the key for making that happen was that I wasn't doing all of it. I think
Okay.
it's an important thing to mention that um, my focus shifted to building up my operations managers, who were the ones who were running those two businesses day to day,
Mm. Okay.
focusing on them as a person and their skills and how I could build them up and teach them any sort of leadership uh, principles that I've learned, um, helping them deal with issues as they come up. So I was involved, obviously, but I wasn't making all of the decisions. And that enabled me to keep working on those businesses from a high level, but also be continually focused on the future, which for us was, what is the next diversity play that we were going to make? What
Yeah.
was the next business? So it took us a couple of years to find the next one. And then, so this fast forward now this is, 2023. We were a couple of years into that second business, and in the meantime, we had made offers on other businesses and took some through due diligence, and they fell through just like any transaction.
Yeah.
But in 2023, we found another business. This one was a little different because it was less about hardcore production of products and more distribution. It had some production element, but it was a good fit.
Okay.
Um, so we went through the process, bought the third business in January of 2024 was our first official day. And so at this point in time, it was kind of fun because I was actually able to take some of the fruits of our labors of developing and improving these other businesses. What had happened was I now had this group of people that were along the journey with me. Those who didn't want to be or weren't fully bought in, either self-selected out, or we made the choice to separate from them.
Hmm.
But at this point in time, I had a really great team of people who were wanting to do more, wanting to learn more, wanting to be challenged. And so I had somebody who was in a role. It was like his second or third role in the company because I was kind of always looking for growth opportunities for him. And with this third acquisition, I immediately shifted him over to be the manager of this new company we just bought.
Oh,
And
okay.
huge growth opportunity for him, very much a stretch a stretch job for him. He didn't have experience doing it, but he was a natural leader, and he had proven to me that he was open to trying new things and doing difficult things. So so then we had our third business, started to work on
Yeah.
that, just add that to the mix. As we progressed, we started to then shift our focus more also to developing our infrastructure more and how we share resources and how we work together. That's just getting more and more refined
Okay.
as we've gone along. So you think about like your HR systems, payroll, time off benefits, all of those core systems. We can leverage one system to handle all of our businesses, which is there's some efficiencies there that are really helpful. You don't have to repeat those in every single business. So what happens is the business can then just focus on the operation, the value that is being created for the customer, and
Okay.
less on are we paying our bills? Are we meeting payroll? Are we making, do we have competitive benefits? Are we recruiting the right people? Like all of those things are happening within our core
Okay.
structure that we have, which is kind of serving all those businesses. So, funny thing though, in 2024, so we started January 1st with that new business. And then through a contact of ours, we ended up actually acquiring the fourth business in August of last year. So we kind of doubled up
Oh,
in one
wow.
year. So that
Hmm.
got us to four. And that business actually, we were peeling a product line off of a bigger business that they were spinning off. And
Okay.
we actually got to move them into our manufacturing facility here. And so we have two main manufacturing facilities, one here in Salt Lake and one in Ogden.
Yeah.
And then we have our metal distribution business, which is in a different building here in Salt Lake. But so now actually had one of our acquisitions here with us in our building, which was especially fun because we introduced a whole new team to
Oh,
our other
wow.
team. So that's
Oh,
where we are
that's cool.
today. Yeah.
So you mentioned you mentioned clearly some of the things that you're finding that do scale that kind of go across the businesses. How do you decide what doesn't come in, get centralized?
At this point, it's if it's if it's something specific to that industry, that customer group, then we don't centralize it. It stays with that line of business.
Okay.
Um, Everything else, we're open to bringing it central. So supply chain is also part of that. You think, and we're kind of in the beginning stages of this, but one thing that we've always had on our radar is that if we're buying, all of our businesses are related to metal in some way.
Okay. Yeah.
Metal fabrication. We use metal in our gym products. We sell metal, and we our most recent acquisition, which is an industrial chiller product, um, is the one that uses the least amount of metal in the ways we use it in our other three businesses. But we're keen on the idea of if we're buying from the same suppliers in each of those businesses, then we certainly have an opportunity for volume, a better price
Yeah.
based on volume if we're consolidating those purchase orders under one purchase order instead of separate
Instead of
ones.
four. Yeah. Okay.
Or less about purchase orders, maybe more on like having a consolidated account.
Yeah.
So the purchase orders could still come from each business as they need it, but that we're locking in that better volume pricing on raw material.
Okay.
So that's something even in the past we were keeping supply chain completely separate, but now we're
Mm.
starting to bring that into. So that's the
Okay.
most recent development.
Okay. I'm curious as you kind of think about that journey, um, if you go back 3 years or go back to when you made your first acquisition, if you imagined where you'd be in 2025, are you where you thought you'd be, or have things evolved differently than you thought?
Um, once we started our acquisition strategy, I feel like we are where I thought we would be. Um, I think we kind of were making it again. My goal was to do an acquisition every year, and so we started that strategy in 2019. And COVID, of course, like I said, kind of put a hold on a lot of those for things for 2 years or so. But we did two last year. So yeah, I think I was hoping we would have four or five businesses by now. Um, so we're getting there.
Nice.
I think the thing that was so we're kind of where I wanted us to be. The thing that was kind of unexpected was how much uh, a unified culture would would be my focus.
Mm,
I knew I wanted to have I wanted us to be a great place to work, and I wanted to create a place where I would want to come to work. And so, but sometimes if if you think you have four different businesses, some of which are not located together, it creates some challenges for maintaining the kind of culture, a unified culture. And I know this is something big businesses deal with all the time, right? Like they have people all over the world.
yeah.
But for us, being a smaller business, we have less than 100 employees. Um, maybe I feel it just even more strongly that we need to have a unified culture because our groups are small.
Yeah.
Um, so
So what's had to change in your leadership across this period, um, to get to where you want to be? You mentioned the culture.
mhm.
What do you have to do to keep that unified?
Yeah, so it is a constant effort. That I would say when I started, it's hard to come up with percentages, but when I started, most of my focus was on how we are improving our processes, how we're improving our production, how we're improving how we take orders. So often,
Hmm.
non-production and production processes were a huge part of my focus, and I still spend time there. But as we've gone on, now today, my focus is primarily on our culture and how I build up the skill sets and the attitudes of our employees every day. So that's like a conscious effort that I'm making right now is I'm I have so many books I'm trying to read right now because I'm trying to learn as much as I can and expand my kind of my knowledge about how to build great places to work. And in fact, last week I was joking because I spent the first part of the week at a leadership conference taught
Hmm.
by retired Navy SEALs. Um, and then literally I got home from that. I was home for one day, and then I went to a marriage retreat with my wife that was taught by a psychologist. So I went from Navy SEALs to psychologists. Um, but the crazy thing is how much those two overlapped
Oh
and how
yeah.
much the principles they talked about were overlapping with these other books I'm reading. I recently I've been reading a book by Dr. Vivek Murthy, who was he was the outgoing Surgeon General, right?
Yeah.
So he served
Yep.
under three presidents,
Yeah.
and just a fascinating guy, and has so many great things to talk about when it comes to loneliness and
Yeah. The epidemic of
feeling.
loneliness, right?
Yeah, yeah, and
Mhm.
so like my mentality is completely shifting toward how do I take care of the people that I've been given stewardship over who have opted to come and work for me and work for our company, who have, self-selected to come be here. And yeah, they get paid to be here, but I'm feeling more and more this weight of stewardship or responsibility for the people who are under our roof, that I want them to come to work and leave a better person. I want them to
Mhm.
be developing skills that they want to develop. I want them to have growth opportunities um, that they maybe have never thought about before.
Mhm.
And and so I want them to enjoy being at work because they spend a lot of time here. And so I want them to have camaraderie with their work colleagues, and to be laughing and enjoying what they're doing, and to also win. I want us to win because it's fun to win.
Right. Right.
Nobody likes to work for like the losing team. And so yeah, kind of bringing all that
Wow.
together, like it's completely changed my approach. And with all the structure we put in place, we use technology a lot.
Yeah.
I get daily reports um, from all of my operations managers, like kind of check-ins, and it's all done through a chat bot. Like we use Microsoft Teams. I get these chat bots from all of my operations managers. We have four of them, one for each business. And so I get kind of a pulse on what's going on. And then I have
Hmm.
weekly one-on-ones with those same people. And so all this structure we put in place has enabled me to then shift my focus toward the
Okay.
the bigger thing, which is honestly, as I think about the future, I don't care what we do at our business. Like I don't care what widget we make. It could be anything.
Yeah.
Um, because I know if we have this really great winning team, that we can pick anything and we'll be able to succeed at it.
Mhm.
If all the right pieces are in place, if it's a product that can win, we will win.
Yeah.
And so that just excites me. Like
That's awesome.
that like drives me to want to come to work every day.
I've got goosebumps as you were talking about that, right? Because I was just talking with somebody and sharing kind of my personal philosophy or mission, and it's very aligned. It's that, thriving employees lead to thriving and profitable companies. And those
Mhm.
same thriving employees lead to thriving families. And thriving
Yeah,
families lead to thriving communities. And thriving communities lead to a better world. And
right.
business can really be a force for good, even though often
Mhm.
it's painted in a very negative, transactional kind of light. So I just think that's awesome, and yeah, it's super cool to hear your mission. So you mentioned that you don't care what you do next, right? That just creating that winning culture that can go out and do the next thing right, right,
Mhm.
is what's important. But what would success for you in 5 years look like? Like, kind of how do you paint that North Star for your team?
Yeah, it really is coming back to that concept that if we are if we are a unified, excited, winning team, and we enjoy working together, um, then it's almost like we don't ever want to retire, like because we're having too much fun. And so that's kind of where my vision is I want every single person that comes to our company to feel that way about coming here, even if they come in as like a very entry level position. I want them to be able to see a path like, hey, I'm I've got my foot in the door now at a company that seems to care about me
Hmm.
and does care about me. I want to stay here as long as I can, and as long as there's something more for me to do, then I want to stay here. That's like what I want our company to be in 5 years. Um, so that, we're starting to see this. I've kind of recruited some people who have come here, and I thought, we'll maybe have them for a couple of years,
Yeah.
and then they're going to finish school and go on to something else. We're just a stepping stone. And what's been fun is we've been able to keep a lot of those people because, and thankfully, if we hadn't been, expanding and diversifying, it wouldn't make as much sense, right?
Yeah.
Like that one guy who I put in charge of one of the acquisitions we did.
Yeah.
If that wasn't an option, I don't think he would still be working here, and I wouldn't get to work with
Mm.
him anymore. So I just love, like in 5 years, I would really hope the people that are working here now are still here,
Yeah.
and everybody that's here has made steps in forward in some way in their life, whether it be professionally or personally, financially, um, just in a better spot from where they were when they came here. And I think about
Oh,
specific people, that have come here that have, they bring whatever baggage they bring with them to this job from the past. And there's one in particular I think of that when he came here, he had, all kinds of problems that he had such a great attitude, but he had just, made some mistakes in the past. So,
okay.
you often see it like in, garnishments and,
All right.
you kind of indirectly see what's going on.
Yeah.
And that guy in particular, like he's a younger guy who has a lot of years ahead of him. And already I feel like he is a different person. And I can't take credit for all of it because I don't work with him every single day. But the culture that's starting to kind of permeate is
Mm,
kind of grabbing him and
yeah.
taking him
Pulling him
along.
forward. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he's
Mm,
happier, he's making better decisions in his personal life. So from a culture perspective, like that's really where my mind is the most in 5 years
yeah.
where I want to be. And I know that if we're doing that and we're really continuously trying to get better at what we do and all of the businesses we have, that we're going to hopefully have, three or four or five more in the mix to be even more diversified and, even bigger. So our family can grow to more people and we can have a bigger impact.
Mm,
So we have our revenue goals, we have our goals of getting to where we want to be. And in 5 years, we're kind of like on a 10-year horizon, really. 2033 is like our big horizon.
yeah.
And at that point, if we hit our goals in 2033, um, we could do anything. Like, and we wouldn't have to, think of ourselves, oh, we're too small, we can't do that, or um, we're too small to offer competitive wages against some of these bigger companies, or we're too small to go in these industries or do these things. Like, I don't want us to be limited by
Okay.
our size.
So you want to hit some scale that'll help you to remove some of those challenges. Um,
Yeah.
and it sounds like so as you were describing that, what I was hearing was the culture that you want to create, it actually kind of depends on achieving growth, and achieving growth depends on the culture.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like
it's true.
so you're kind of creating this engine, right,
Hmm.
that's fueled by growth and helping to drive culture and people, right, that keep that
Right.
sustaining.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And you could, I mean, theoretically, you could do that with one business. But for our situation, I think you just have to evaluate where you are.
Okay.
In our situation, I had the first business, the gym products business, was great business, had been around a long time, a lot of long term, a lot of our employees, we're celebrating now like 35-year anniversaries of some of our
Hmm.
employees. Some of them are pushing 40 years. We just had a retiree that was about 40 years working at our company. So there's some great things happening
Yeah.
culturally too. But and it would have been great if that business had a huge runway of, growth opportunities. But that business is in a niche market, and so there's only so
And
much
stable and
growth.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so some businesses can kind of just have that huge runway. For us, we're trying to create multiple runways,
Yeah.
and we're always looking for companies that can grow. And so yeah, for us, it is like the culture leads to the growth and the growth helps promote the culture. It really does come back to like, how do we find a better way to do something? And it could be compared to a competitor, it could be to some status quo that there's not like a good solution in the market,
Yeah.
but it's also like, how do we do better than ourselves? um, but I think about when I started, we were working two shifts, almost 24-hour total shift wise, um, 6 and sometimes 7 days a week to keep up with our demand. Um, Now we are doing more than double the production in one shift, which is so fun to see. And that's all just like thousands of little iterative changes that have been made.
Yeah.
Um, and and so now the team is just like they're loving just like now they're looking at the next thing. They're loving that they won something and we're able
Mm,
to like leverage that win to do other things.
yeah. That's cool. So, I mean, and maybe you've already articulated this, but like what kind of legacy are you trying to build? Like what would you want kind of at the end of your career? How would you want to see your efforts?
Yeah, so it comes back to what I mentioned kind of in the beginning of um, I had to take in my mind, take myself all the way to the worst case scenario
Yeah.
in like a health in what I felt like was kind of a healthy way, like not getting so scared of it or depressed about it, but I had to like work myself to that end so that I could let go and start to look at focus on other people.
Mm,
And then so it wasn't so much about me. Um, and so the legacy I want to leave is I want it to be always about how are we developing other people and how are we and this includes our customers too. I want our customers, I love personally to have I think us we all do. I love to have a positive experience with the company or with a
hmm
someone I'm giving my money to. and and so I want our customers to love working with us and I want my employees to love working for me and almost not even feel like they're working for me, but they are working with this team that
mm,
they are just they're getting pushed, they're growing, they're getting better. So I want if I were to choose a legacy, that would be it. Um, I know the financial side of things
yeah.
are gonna be taken care of. Like if we're doing all these things, we're gonna win. And even if we make some mistakes and we don't win, we're still like I'm personally still gonna be okay. And and so
Mm,
it's more about what if I look back and I maybe I imagine like a we're at like a Christmas party or something or a summer party and I see like all of these families coming together with these people who are so proud, our employees who are so proud to work for us
hmm
and to be a part of our team and to see their families um, supported and having the things that they need to thrive and to have just see like all these smiling faces like that's to me that's my dream I guess
Awesome.
I love bringing the families together at company parties like it's
Yeah.
so you get to see like the rest of this person.
Who people really are. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, um, I'm curious if you were talking to a young entrepreneur, right, who's at one of those jumping off points, like you
Hmm.
were, considering whether or not to, get into the family business or, take a leap. What advice would you give them right now as you look back at your journey?
I would say just do it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Especially when if if you're younger, you have some runway to reorganize if you need to. You might have to go back to school or go find a different job again. But like, why not? Why not try it? Something if you see the opportunity. I guess my first advice would be look for the opportunities. Um, maybe it's in your family. You have a family business to go after, or maybe through a connection, you know of somebody who's retiring and
Hmm
they don't have a succession plan because somebody doesn't want to be, they don't have anybody who's interested in their business. So I'd say look for those opportunities and go after them and don't get so caught up in kind of this like maybe it's like this social media culture of like if you're I would have never like been I'm not on social media, but like I would have never been proud to like walk around and take pictures of like some of our equipment and say, like, look how cool it is that I work here. Like some of these business there's so many great businesses out there that are not
Not
They're not these like
sexy.
flashy. Yeah, exactly. And like people
Uh,
aren't aspiring necessarily to work there, but
mhm.
it's been so fascinating to me, this glimpse I've had of all of these individual businesses we've talked to over the last 5 years. There are so many great businesses that not only can provide you with a good living,
Yeah.
but also create some really cool value in the world. So
Mm.
my advice would be, don't be afraid to kind of go against the norm of like, I have to be in this kind of professional position to make it.
Yeah.
There's because there's so many great opportunities, and to go after it, and to not and to again, like I've told this advice to many people of like, don't be afraid of um what could go wrong. Like you have to like accept it, like that
Mm.
it could, and but you're still going to go forward.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't, it's like the definition of courage is not being fearless. It's right, seeing the fear and moving forward despite of it. Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
So,
that's a way more eloquent way to put
mm,
it.
excellent.
It's very true.
Awesome, man. Thanks. It's been a real pleasure, Tyler. Thank you for coming and joining me at Untold. It's been awesome hearing your passion for culture at LR Dynamics and your journey and some of the things that you've had to overcome. If somebody wanted to learn more about LR Dynamics or any of the companies that you own, where would they go?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me. It's fun to talk about my experience. But if they want to learn more about our company, they can just go to lrdynamics.com.
Okay.
LR Dynamics is the kind of the parent company, so our website reflects that, and you can learn more about each of our individual businesses and explore there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. This has been a real joy talking to you, and I wish you the very best of luck going forward. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. I'm excited to hear other stories.
Thank you. All right. Talk to you later.
All right,
Bye.
thanks, John.